Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the age of Sigmar. Your allies across the Duarden diaspora this episode are...
Hey, I'm Paul. And guys, did you know that Snoop Dogg is in AOS?
No.
I mean, I feel like if you read this book, you're going to love his greatest hit, Drop It Like It's Hot.
What?
I'm Harry, and I didn't realize Santa had such a big axe.
And I'm Davy, and if I have to listen to too many Paul theories this episode, I will feel so old I will be the white-bearded ancestor.
Watch out.
Yeah. Hey, in this episode, we're going to cover grudges, beer, long memories, and short tempers. And after that, if we have time, we'll cover Grombrindal. How are you tonight, fellas?
Doing great.
All right, cool. I feel like to do the story phase, to do it right, I should get a little more hopped up on coffee or something. I got to bring that that nervous Aaron energy into this, but
yeah, more self-deprecating. Come on.
And well, yeah, both. You know,
you got to apologize to your future children quite often as well.
The man needs to stop. He's already got 3. But no, I tell you what, listeners, if you think it's kind of mean for us to be dunking on Aaron while he's not here, guess what? He is here. He's having to edit this, so he's having to listen to me dunk on him right now.
He gets to enjoy all of this.
Yeah, Aaron, he is very cool. I love Aaron. But that's what he's going to be doing. How about you tell me what you have been doing in the hobby? Let's start with you, Paul.
Well, I have been working on some squigs. So we're starting a new season of Path the Story. So I've picked up on the squig herd. I had it before it was good, just everybody. So just so you know. But I was super inspired. Hipster. I know. Right? I just got to put some mustaches and some plaid shirts on my squigs, and I'll be all set to go.
Oh yeah, get him in skinny jeans.
Oh man, that would totally work.
I gotta go wash my brain out now. The thought of squigs and skinny jeans.
I mean, have you heard that soundtrack on vinyl? It's so much better, but I got heard of it. It's really obscure. So, Harry, what have you been working on?
So I'm also, of course, working on the new season of Path to Story, and I'm doing a Dark Oath army, Slaves to Darkness. So I have been working on squigs as well. No, I suffered a severe bout of hobby ADD this last month, and have spent most of my free time on some Boingrop Bounders that need to look a lot more like Bretonnian knights. So thankfully I learned how to, thanks to, was it Chris Peach, taught me how to put masking tape as fabric using super glue. And so that saved me a whole lot of frustration with green stuff. And I've been able to put barding on 10 Boingrop Bounders and put little pendants on their lances, and I'm excited to get them painted up in a variety of knightly colors.
Very cool. I love it. For me, I had a brief moment of excitement where, it's been a real roller coaster with Adepticon, which is kind of the event on the horizon. G-Dub was pretty slow to pull the trigger on a Grand Clash. And by the time they set it for Saturday, Sunday, I was already committed to a spring break trip. So I will not make it to the Grand Clash, kind of the marquee event for us over in Underworld's land on What the Hex. But there is actually, I have no idea who these guys are. The Dice Heroes are doing a Wednesday night event. So my official Adepticon begins and is over on Wednesday night.
Wow.
I'll be hanging out for another 24 hours plus maybe 36 hours into Friday morning. But just kind of hanging loose, doing the Dos Esos style, Aaron floating around. Hopefully running into listeners, playing some pickup games. I think we're trying to do a Mortal Realms get together thing. I don't know how in the know you guys are. I'm pushing for it. Have you guys heard of this game, Blood on the Clock Tower?
I haven't talked about it. It sounds fun.
Yeah. It's like a social deduction game that has been very refined. So think like Werewolf like One Night Werewolf or whatever.
Okay.
But with a lot of different roles, information gathering, and pretty appropriate to us in our kind of narrative lanes is it has a neutral storyteller who helps kind of craft the experience. So,
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That sounds fun.
Yeah, we'll see if I'm not going to force it on folks, but I think it'd be cool because there's nothing that really brings a team together like accusing each other of being demons and murdering your friends. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like a great Friday night.
Not much else will quite like that.
yeah, technically a true statement. I don't think we've kind of danced around a little bit. We are going to cover Grombrindal today. That Paul, why don't you? We'll get into that in just a second here. I do have a couple plugs to hit. If I don't, then Aaron will hang me at the gallows even before we play Blood on the Clock Tower. So. You're listening to this episode now. Great. I don't know how you found it. I'm still surprised by how many people show up to the Discord and they say, "Yeah, I just searched on Spotify and found it." Well, there's tons of episodes of this. We have you can find them at themortalrealms.com. Any of the many podcasts in our network. We'd love to hear from you. You can talk to us at mortalrealms@gmail.com, or even better, come check us out at the Discord and hang out with a bunch of your closest friends from all over. That are into the same things you're into. If you feel like supporting us, which for some reason people do, you can hop on to patreon.com / the Mortal Realms. Support the show. Right now, you can get early releases of the story phase, and there's some content like the Pocket Realms where Aaron and I will do short story coverage. And talk about those. We try to get roughly one a month done on that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And if you can't do that, if you can't support us monetarily, totally cool. Just go ahead and recommend us to somebody, either word of mouth or whatever podcast service you're doing, using, rate us and give us a review. That really helps other people find us. So those people who are searching on Spotify, they're only doing it because, or they're only, really finding us because of the work some of the rest of you have done. So get us out there to more people, and we'd really appreciate it.
Right. And it helps us know how we're doing because, we like to go and read our own reviews. So leave us a review.
Guy who hasn't had bad reviews.
He's young yet. He's young yet. He'll get it.
But that's it. Hey, we have what could be a mammoth episode. I talked about maybe getting old because of Paul theories. What I'm really going to get, we were joking before the episode, it's possible that we may not finish this before I have to go to work in about 6 hours here. So let's get to it. Paul, do that thing you do, man.
The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. There's actually a fun little discussion about which was the 9th realm on our Discord. So,
oh yeah,
I don't think we actually came to a consensus, but
yeah, I mean, it's lost to the mist of time. But I feel like I got a pretty strong memory of it. But yeah, I think it was back early AOS. I think Eric and I were discussing how many to put in there. I think we ended up, it might have even been Mouse might have still been involved. I think they settled on the realm of chaos being the 9th realm.
Right.
I think I described myself as agnostic to that theory, but not enough to fight against it. So
you're telling me there were Paul theories before I was even on the podcast.
like the Paul theories. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Proto.
Speaking of the mists of time,
yeah.
We're going to be covering the Grombrindal book. So Grombrindal is one of those characters who has been around for forever. If you've been to Warhammer World, they've had miniatures of him that you can buy from Warhammer Fantasy. And so he's a pretty cool character, and we've got a pretty sweet book. It's kind of a non-traditional book as far as Black Library releases are, because it has an anthology, and then it also has a short story / novella at the end.
Yeah, I think we've been remiss so far. It's a David Guymer, a David Guymer joint, as you might say. So
exactly.
Right, and
go ahead.
So this is Grombrindal Chronicles of the Wanderer.
Yep.
which all of the stories in here were written by David Guymer, and you've also seen him with Realmslayer and Realmslayer Blood of the Old World were both his works, which is where he may have introduced a possibility for Grombrindal showing up in the Old World or in the New World.
Hey guys, you've been saying Grombrindal a lot. Well, how might people otherwise know said character?
The Red Dwarf, right? No, wait. That's
that's that other show.
I think he's called the White Dwarf, right?
Yeah. The White Dwarf or the White Dwarden, depending on if you're in the world that was or the realms here. So
exactly. So we're going to start off with a bit of a spoiler-free talk about this novel, which is going to be, it's kind of a weird thing to talk about. We were talking about it before we started recording, and we've got these short stories and we've got this novella. And so we're going to try and give you a little bit of what you're going to get and what you can have some expectations for. But obviously, when you're discussing 7 different stories, there's going to be some stuff that's left out. So be aware. We're going to talk a little bit about what you can expect, but then each story is going to kind of have its own breakout from there. So we're going to have one big spoiler-free phase. If you haven't read them, go read them and then listen to it. Or if you just want to listen to it, all right, well, you're not going to have to listen through 7 spoiler-free phases because we thought that'd be a little much. So,
Yep.
So as we're talking about, these stories are about Grombrindal, also known as the White Dwarf or the White Dwarden. Each of them is set in a slightly different time, slightly different place. They deal with pretty much every aspect of Dwarden culture that we know. And this is also kind of an interesting situation where you might have read some of these stories, even if you haven't read a Black Library novel before, because 5 of these short stories were also published in White Dwarf as a serial. That's
the magazine, not the character.
Exactly, not the character. Super confusing, I understand. But they have been published previously in White Dwarf, except for the last short story and the novella itself. So we're dealing with the Dispossessed, we're dealing with Fire Slayers, we're dealing with Karajan Overlords. There's even a Go Trek kind of tie-in story that we're doing here. So what do you guys think about what would you include in a spoiler-free talk about what these 7 stories are going to be about?
Oh boy. So like you mentioned, they take place all across the timeline of Age of Sigmar, or the Mortal Realms rather, ranging all the way from the early Age of Chaos, end of the Age of Myth, all the way up to the current era of the Beast, with some significant stops in the time of the Necroquake or Soul Wars as we knew it on the game side. So it's all over the place timeline wise. As far as location goes, we visit at least 3 of the Mortal Realms, and we may get glimpses into others at points along the way. But significant parts of the story take place in Akshi, in Shaman, and in Hish.
Davey, do you have any quick thoughts on other things that you think would be important for people to know before they dive in?
No, I think it's such a broad spectrum that I think it might even be better to just kind of there's a whole lot we're going to cover with it, so I think we can just jump into it.
I think the last thing I'd add, and sorry, David, the last thing that I would add is if you liked Dwarden or dwarves, you're going to love this book.
Well, that's what we often do is do you recommend the book? And if so, to whom do you recommend it? And I think you're answering that right now. So yeah, lay it out.
This is definitely for people who enjoy stories about stunties. It covers all different flavors of Dwarden in the Mortal Realms, it also has some good flashbacks to the old world and the culture of the old world that we knew as dwarves. And there's some good glimpses at some of the other races and how they're viewed by the Duarden in the mortal realms.
Yeah. I would concur with that entirely. I have really enjoyed the Caradhran overlords, but this was a good reminder that I do like the other Duarden factions as well. And honestly, it made me a little nostalgic for old world dwarves. I kind of forgot how much I like those guys. They pop up in some of the stories more featured than others, but
I think it reminded me that they're not really gone. That underlying it, it's still dwarven culture. It may be called Duarden culture, and it may manifest in these different flavors or expressions that we see in the Fire Slayers or the Caradhran, but deep down, they're still the dwarves that we know and love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the things that we've kind of danced around is that if you've never heard of Grombrindal, you don't know who the White Dwarf or the White Duarden is. He's not a god, but he definitely benefits from some prolonged life.
Or is he?
Yep. That's kind of an interesting question that we approach in these short stories. But as we're talking about it, we're from this era to this era, from this realm to this realm. So one of the things that you are going to get is some stories that really tie all these Duarden together. But the White Dwarf is going to be present in all of them because he is this long-lived ancestor, as it were. So make sure your expectations are there, that it's not going to be like a one-off of, it's telling the epic story of one lifetime of one person. Yes, and also at the same time, no, this is not a normal person. So it's also what makes these stories fun for me, is because he also likes to not show up as himself, right? Like he's got kind of a man of many faces aspect to him. And so one of the enjoyable aspects for me is trying to figure out which one we're kind of talking about and like what's going on differently in every story. And how that can be traced back to a cohesive character. So
you'll find that the more you read them, it gets pretty easy to figure out that, there he is. But it's still, there's these kind of unifying themes, it's fun to see him pop up and just see it. Not so much like which one is he, but like, what does he look like this time? Or, how, and not just like what's different, but what's the same, because you have these Duarden from all these different cultures, but they have some similarities still. And so that's that.
And figuring out what he's up to in each story too. Because his role and his goals may not always be as straightforward as you would expect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So a quick disclaimer before we start jumping into the full spoiler review. As I was telling these guys before we started, if you've ever listened to a Pocket Realms, Aaron and I can spend an hour on just one of those short stories. There are 6 short stories and a novella here. So add that all up and we're talking like 9 hours of content here. So we're really going to, I don't want to say blitz through, but we're going to be circumspect in our summaries of these, so we kind of hit on the points that we really want to discuss, and kind of convey some of the things that we really like about it. And our original format was that Paul's going to kind of steer us through the short stories. I'm gonna snatch that away from him right now. I want to do this first one. I'm going to take Mother of Fire, and then I'm going to turn the wheel over to you, Paul. So
all right. So
you good with that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
But I feel like I have to do Aaron some due and prepare myself to be like the spoiler phase.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
As he likes to do. So
yeah. And I'm realizing I got to stop. Giving him a hard time because he has the ultimate control with the editing.
Right.
He could just saying some really ridiculous stuff here. Aaron is very cool. I love Aaron.
You can keep going because the end supercut after the credits is going to be amazing.
So Mother of Fire, first story. You can just guess in the title that you would guess that we were talking about fire slayers, and you'd be correct. This is some of the stuff I really like about doing stories. So there's a rune father and a rune mother. Helga Hrafnsdóttir is kind of the main point of view we see, but they have a new child, a new rune son, and it's a ritual. Like, how long can this rune son withstand this like totally blistering heat? And I mean, that's just like the theme all through this story is like everything's hot. Like they're already in a hot place and they're going deeper into the heart of this volcano lodge that they're in. And in what is like not quite slapstick, but like oof. This rune son is like just toughing it out through just a tremendous amount of heat, to the extent that his father is holding him out as like clearly like uncomfortable, and then there's a tremor and he drops the rune son. And it's not like, it took me a while to figure this out, but this rune son like falls a long way. Yeah. You can hear him crying. And so a rescue mission gets launched, and as part of this, there's a strange hearth call. Askarn, is that the name? Askarn. And this is the finger on the nose. This is who we understand is Grombrindal in this. Right. You know, he's a hearth call where they're like, he's family, but I don't quite remember how. You know, it's like that cousin that I know that guy seems real familiar, but I can't remember why I know him.
Yeah, part of it too was for this ritual, a lot of other lodges come to pay their respects.
Yep.
And so you've got fjords from all across the area who are there. So, you know, this guy snuck in amongst them and they all just assumed he belonged to somebody else.
Yes. So the rescue team gets down to the bottom. They keep going deeper and deeper. And there is a rune smiter that is holding the heat at bay, elderly and like really struggling to do this. So even with their natural heat resistance, and they get to the bottom and they see these claw marks, and it's clear that a magmadroth must have got the kid. And part of my head is like, surely not. Like I don't think they would do that, but maybe they would. I don't know. And they're getting ready to give up, but as Karn and the mother are like, no, like we at least got to bring him back. Like even if he's dead, we got to bring him back. And I really like this moment where they go by. There's like an opening, you know, kind of like a lava tube. They're like, well, that's a weird dead end thing. And then uncoiling from it is a magmadroth, which if you can think of a place where it would be any better camouflage than deep in the heart of a volcano, well, let me know, because I can't think of one. There's a fight here. There's Helga is laying into it. Askarn, the White Dwarden, as Fire Slayer, they've managed to kind of team up and slay this thing. And there's a moment of like kind of empathy where they feel bad. Like what she was actually doing was defending her baby magmadroths.
Right. And real quick, Davey, like the magmadroth snuck up on them through something I don't think we've seen in the lore before about magmadroths. Like before, they've talked about different colors of magmadroth having different significance. But here they seem to indicate that some or most magmadroths have the ability to, almost like a chameleon, change their color as camouflage, which I thought was just a really cool lore piece.
Yeah. That was new to me as well. But I thought it was possible that I had just kind of missed it, but maybe not. Let's see. Well, so, and this is cool. After the defeat, they're like, well, you know, we've at least avenged the Rune Son. And lo and behold, he was mistaken for a magmadroth baby. And so he's there with a clutch of newly hatched magmadroths. Quite the prize to recover. So they recover both the Rune Son and a bunch of magmadroths from quite an ancient mother. So quite possibly very powerful.
Exactly. I really enjoyed this story. It's a hard time for me when like you're talking about parents like losing their children and stuff like that. But I thought that the topic was dealt with really well.
Yeah.
I thought that it was believable that there would be this ritual where you literally hold your child out into blistering heat until they
Yeah.
cry to see how strong they are, right?
Yeah.
I, I was shocked, but also like it's a fantasy story of like the dad dropping his son because it was so hot. Like instead of pulling him in, he's like, I'm so proud that my son has not cried. I'm literally just gonna oh crap.
Yeah.
So on the audiobook version of this on Audible, this story in particular was narrated by Emma Gregory, and she does an amazing job of putting a lot of emotion into the lines, both the emotion of the Rune Father and just how proud he is that his son's not crying, and how stubborn he is. He's holding his son out there even as his arms are burning.
Yeah.
And then just the venom with which she delivers the Rune Mother's lines when she's just angry at him for dropping her son. It's an amazing narration of this story. And I gotta say, like, what a way to open up this book with this story, and to be bold enough to introduce a whole different class of character than we see in the board game, with the Rune Mother. I finished this story and immediately was tweeting like, Games Workshop, we need a Rune Mother
when.
Yeah, like exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's my only question. When are we going to see these really strong Duardan women represented on the table?
Totally. This story was also kind of the first sense where I got the White Dwarf wasn't just the idea. White Duardan, in this case, Askarn, is not just like the essence of Duardan distilled, which is kind of what I maybe assumed he would be, but he's so old and experienced that he knows Duardan better than any others, and and he knows not just like what their strengths are, but their faults, and he talks about the back and forth, like grudgement begets grudgement. He talks about the daughters of Volcatrix seek to dominate the sons of Grimnir, just as you would conquer them in return. This kind of like, for a race that really values wisdom, he did a good job of just showing this guy to be wise. And there was this, I know it's just the first story, but maybe at least a contender for my favorite line in the whole book. They've recovered the Rune Son, and he says, they get him up, and Askarn says, "Promise me you teach him something other than war, though. The Fire Slayers deserve more than their god's worst hour." Whoa, like Black Library, what are you doing? Whoa, wow, that's great stuff. I mean, I was like, I read that a few times. It's like, man, that is good. That is really good. And it's that kind of wisdom of like, hey, I know you guys are all about war and fury and hot rage and all this sort of thing, but like, think about more than that. Like, oh man.
Yep. And that's a theme we're going to see throughout this book is he's there to remind them of their better selves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And believe in their better selves, even if they themselves don't want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I really enjoyed this story. And with all the first 5 stories we're going to talk about here, I read all of them in White Dwarf, and then I read all of them in the short story. And none of them was like, oh, I'm slogging through. Like all of these were really enjoyable for me to read because they were so clear about the identity. And I think that's something that David Guymer did really well in this anthology of short stories, is he took an aspect of Duardan culture and he gave us a moment that felt very believable and very enjoyable. And then he teased out this fault, but also redemption, as it were, from each of those stories as well. So this is the beginning of something that felt very cohesive to me. So, are you okay if we move on to the next one?
Please take. Yep. You can wrestle the wheel away from me here, Paul.
All right, sounds good. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Old Whitebeard Special. So this one is in the Spiral Crux. So for those of you that are kind of new, this was Grungy's Realm, twisted by Tzeentch, and this story is about refounding a tavern that had been founded previously in the Spiral Crux, But then they were driven out by the Age of Chaos, and now coming back to refound the tavern in the exact place that it was before. And I hear you saying, why would you do that? Like, that just doesn't sound like a great idea. To me, this very much felt like I was able to go into a distillery and open, and they talk about how the water is such a specific water that everything changes if you go anywhere else. It felt very much like that for this, and it's because of the ale that they make here. And specifically, there is a special ale that they make every year. And we get the character of Brita, who is the first kind of character introduced. And so she's a female, and she starts out super young. And we see her talking with her father, Bjarn. And then they reference their grandfather, Bragnor, and a couple of other like cast of characters that are the locals. And like I said, this is very much okay, we're talking about the dispossessed here, honoring ancestry. This tavern is built exactly the same to every detail they can imagine.
There was a moment very early in the story before I knew where it was headed where she kind of tiptoes down the stairs, and she's going through the drinking hall or the main room, and people aren't noticing her, like including some elves. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? Like I didn't even know what realm we're in yet at this point. I was entertaining the possibility that she was a ghost. Like I was like, I don't know, maybe I've read too many like Warhammer horror. It ended up clearly not being that, but that's one of the things I like about a set of like a collection of short stories like this, is because they could take any kind of crazy direction they want. So, and that's I like the repeated discovery, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. This was a fun little story for a different way of looking at Dwarden. I felt like,
and it did a great job of sort of giving you a picture into the mindset of the dispossessed as they came back to the mortal realms after the Realm Gate Wars to resettle, and just what a point of pride it was for them to be able to return to the land of their ancestors, because Azir was never home for them.
Right.
Even though these particular Duarden probably never lived in Shaman before Brita's grandfather resettled it. They knew that this was their land. This was where they were from. And so it harkens back to that. Oh yeah, there was something before the Age of Chaos, a good time that they were looking back to.
Yeah. So when you're talking about that, Davy, where she slips down the stairs, she first encounters this old Dwarden on a bar stool. We're pretty clear at this point that like, oh, yep, this is the White Dwarf. This is Grombrindal. He has a different name. And there are two other specific things that are called out, is that his stein, he has a stein that he, we find out later, is hung behind the bar, and then also an axe called Old Reliable. One of the fun things I like about the stein is that they talk about the rune, and we know that that's Bugman's rune because, we know that is, but that's not something that's really spelled out. And so it's something, if you knew from WHFB, you're going to know, but if you didn't, it kind of goes over your head. But he, the old Dwarden here, is really the master tester. Like he will taste this bearded special that they have every year, and he'll be like, it needs a little bit of this. Oh, it needs a little bit of that. Right. And her father is very smart and says, oh, by the way, we're fixing that. Right. And the tavern that we're talking about here is just full of all these different people, like full of life, full of laughter, full of everything. And we get this different kind of approach from the last story, whereas in the last story, the White Dwarf is there for the entire story. In this one, he shows up, and then we get a time skip. One of the not classical tropes, but like one of the ways that we tell stories sometimes in AOS. And from there, we come back, and now Brita is now 19 instead of this little girl sneaking down the stairs, right? And we understand that every year he comes to taste the bearded special. Every year he gives this idea. And then we get a little bit of a history of Bragnor, who is her grandfather, founded this tavern, and he's the one who received the tankard to begin with, and he keeps it behind the bar just so when the White Dwarf comes, that he will be there for him. So because he's been asked to store it, right? And we also find out, sadly, that her father is slowly dying. And we have a couple more of these time skips, and things get worse, and people aren't coming as much as they used to. We start to get some violence and other stuff showing up. I did like this moment where a wine drinking elf that's obviously a wanderer had another great line here, where he says, maybe you should just leave. Like it's getting unsafe, and maybe this is bad.
Yeah.
And he says, quote, "If only my people had had the foresight to stay and die." Like, oh, Aaron, I could hear your heart hurting right there for these wanderers. With that, it was such a great moment for me. So I really enjoyed that. And then turns out that when the White Dwarf came the last time, he recommended this specific herb be put in, and lo and behold, they have Night Haunt, and the seed in the beer is helping them to heal these Night Haunt wounds, right? So a bit of a prophetic almost idea of going on here. So, and then we get this slow, everyone just starts to leave. All the people that were crowding in are leaving. All this cast of characters of the village. One of them slowly goes off in the middle of the night, never to come back. Another one dies on the road. And so Brita is talking to the Whitebeard, and his father has just died, and he hasn't been for a couple of years, and she's trying to deal with this, and she's like, "So how long did you know my father was going to die?" And he says, "You think you're the only one. Or you think he was the only one." And this moment of him knowing what's going on and watching, like a big theme of this specific story with Grombrindal is the pain of watching this slow demise, the pain of watching, people die and things move on. And we get this kind of final showdown, as it were, where the bar cellar itself in the tavern starts to have noises come down from it, and she goes down to check it out, and turns out her ancestors are rising from their crypt, which should never happen because they had these runes brought in and this stone from Azir, and so she's faced with this final moment of, what do I do, right? How do I approach this problem, because this is my grandfather's land, my grandfather's tavern. And she finally makes the decision to grab the tankard, to grab the axe, and to leave the tavern. And it was only at this moment that I realized this is the only moment in the short story where we're actually outside of the tavern.
Good point.
And as she leaves the tavern, the White Dwarf is standing there being like, "Oh, good. You made the right choice. Right? I told your grandfather not to build here, and there's no reason to die for things that aren't worth dying for." Right? Basically. And now we need to move on.
Yeah.
So it's, for those of you who don't have a great knowledge of the Dispossessed, this is the opposite of what the Dispossessed are known for, and the opposite of the advice that she gets earlier. So definitely a twist. So what did you guys think about this one?
So a couple thoughts that I had about this one. Early on, I love to look at just that Duardan stubbornness and pride, that they're coming back to the land that they had lost before the Age of Chaos, and then how they credit Whitebeard's advice with the success of their family. The input that he has on the special every year is why they've done so well, why they're surviving so well. And so then it's surprising, as you're reading or listening to the story, to see it decline over time. And you think, well, this guy's helping him out. Why is this happening? And what you come to realize is you're seeing the movement of time from post Realmgate Wars up to the beginning of the Soul Wars.
Yeah.
And so that was the other neat thing of this, is you see this character in Brita go from a child all the way to a fairly old lady, And that whole lifetime takes place between these two periods that for us were essentially first edition and second edition of Age of Sigmar. So you may not always have a conception of how much time occurred between those two events. So I thought that was a really neat thing to have in there. And then to see, how widespread the effects of the necroquake were.
Sure.
My son got a kick out of, anytime we hear in Black Library stories, just the effects of the necroquake and the soul wars. And in this, it was, now the cellar that they've had where their ancestors were buried underneath them the entire time suddenly isn't safe because things have changed in the realms.
Yeah. And there's one last little detail I want to point out, which is that each time that he comes, he leaves that night. And the last time she says, please stay. And he's like, but I can't, I have things to do. And she's like, please, for me. And so for that one night he stays, but he says, quote, but someone will pay. Right.
Yeah.
So we're starting to understand. Go ahead.
Oh, he looks so tired. That is like an ongoing thing. Often he will show up and he just looks exhausted. And so it's this guy who's got we're not really sure what the limit of his power is, what the extent of his power is, but it is limited in some way. Like clearly he's exhausted and, it's just this, it's clear that he can be in many places at once, but obviously can't be everywhere at once if, just he has to make some sacrifice. Like you can see the exhaustion is probably coming from this constantly deciding, like, do I stay and comfort this one Duarden here in this alehouse, or do I go to this other place where I'm needed? And it gives a little bit of tragedy to his character, which is cool. To talk about our unifying things with this at the end, where that wisdom that he's bringing wherever he goes, she tries to return the tankard to him, and he says, "Keep it, build again somewhere else, anywhere else. If the beer is good enough, then the Duarden will come, and perhaps others too. Turn no one away." And here he's speaking, not just like the traditional dwarven thing is isolationism, right? So not just about like the holds in the mortal realms that kind of sealed themselves up during the Age of Chaos, but going all the way back to the world that was, that was a thing where at the end times, that was for a long time, as much of the story of the old world was the dwarves kind of sealing themselves away during the tough times. And so he's seeing that as something that worked against him in the long run.
Right.
All right. Can we move on to the Maker's Mark? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Not at all a reference to the whiskey, I swear. But this is I was excited about this one from the first moment I read it in The White Dwarf, because this short story is set in Hish. And this was one of our first actual stories that we got to see in that realm. And I thought it was super fun. So basically what we have is this Dwarden engineer named Rickhorn McCazarin, and he is wandering through this Hishian wilderness. And what we get is we're in the mountains of Sayar, which is a specific place, and he's basically fighting this test. And the test is literally to pass through this wilderness. And it talks about how this has to be done alone. And so we get some really wild actual things here. It talks about how they're predators in this wilderness, and some of them are ravenous promises, right? Like, so predators of thoughts, because in the realm of light, the realm stone is actually these beams of light, unless they are collected and coalesced. So it's different. It's a different idea. There is no night because we are in the realm of light. So the sun never sets. So he has these cool little like blackout sunglasses.
I like those. Yeah.
We get this interesting thing where he has an ancestor statue that he prays to. So that was kind of fun, a little idea. And he goes down to sleep, and he's woken up by this battle. and he fights a white bearded engineer. Wonder who that is. And he's fighting an Elementor, which is those things that are the mountains, right? That they have these masks that they put the mountains on, and then they become these massive statues that help fight with Lumineth. But this one is the form of a broken wall. So really, things are confused and predatory. So he helps this white-bearded ancestor to defeat this Elementor, and then they share food. And then Necrozen refuses an offer to be taught at the moment, and he says, "quote I'll hold you in debt a while longer," which I thought was a great Dwarden touch here. Really emphasizing the Iron Weld is what we're getting here, but also a bit of a dispossess as well. Turns out that Necrozen is actually the third person of his family to make this journey, and no one has made it yet. And he has to leave the ancestor because this journey must be made alone. He invokes the names of Alaric, the Mad, Bugman, the Brewer, and Malachi McKyson, which are, again, those are WHFB references from Age of Chaos, or the War of Chaos, and all this kind of stuff. So, but he does eventually make it to this town called Ar Escanath, which is just absolutely beautiful. And he immediately becomes downhearted because he's there to share the things that he has made as an engineer. And as soon as he gets to the city, he's just like, what am I supposed to do? Like, nothing here is going to be even close to impressing anybody. And to highlight this point, we meet a character called Enrisrith, and everything that he has is just stunning. And Necrozen is just like, okay, I'm done. And he just ends up drinking in a tavern. And we encounter, again, Grombrindal. And he shows Grombrindal what he has made. And it's basically a really good tool. It's a spyglass that is made from this quartz that is taken from a specific mountain in the realms. And it's really good. Like, it's the best spyglass you can make. But he's just like, it looks terrible compared to everything that these Lumineth are making. And Grombrindal is like, okay, we're gonna fix this. But what did you make for yourself? Like, you made this beautiful thing, but how have you like actually expressed yourself in your forging, right? In your art. And so Grombrindal takes him to a forge, and he makes something that he wants to make, which is basically just beautiful lenses. So instead of making a tool, he just makes a beautiful thing from the sources that he has. And of course, we end with him showing off these beautiful lenses and everybody loving him. And then this other character, this Lumineth, who was so haughty in the last one, almost starting a fight with him because everybody's looking at his stuff, at the Dwarden's stuff instead of his. And then Grombrindal steps in and be like, hey, maybe we can do something together. So what are you guys' thoughts on that one?
So this is a very low conflict one, right? Like there's and I'm talking like physical conflict. There's the one battle with the element or the rock wall thing. And then everything else is just this kind of cultural discussion. And I don't know a ton about the Realm Lords. I like some of, again, like I'm kind of in this for a lot of the wisdom that is being dispensed. At one point, where he's getting the pep talk from Grombrindal, he says, those things are beautiful. He's talking about the elven artifacts. If you know your craft, and trust me, the Ciari do know their craft, but they take their inspiration from their realm stone and from their light. We're Duarden. The spirit of our craft comes from someplace much deeper. And that was kind of a fun distinction to make, to think about it in those terms. Because that, some of that competition has existed in the past. It was like, who's the better craftsman, the Duarden or the elves, because they each have their forge gods. But again, if you say, what is he doing here? You get to that thing. I'd wager you've a lot to learn from each other is kind of the ending line. So not just kind of building bridges throughout. Like it's traditional for dwarves that hate elves, right? That's a thing dating back into the War of the Beard or War of Vengeance or whatever you want to call it. And to see that Grombrindal is making strides to try and build those. Harry, did you get anything from this?
Yeah. So, I mean, my son's a huge Lumineth fan. And so listening to this, I think this may have been his favorite short story out of the entire book. And it's because he knows a ton about the lore of the Lumineth. So as soon as he heard that they were in Syar and he was going to this engineering competition, he was like, "Oh, he's in trouble," because he knew that the Syari were also great artisans, and so it was fun to see that play between the Ironweld Arsenal and the Syari, as basically the foremost engineers in the two races, and how they were competing in a non-violent way, though it did come close to violence a couple times. I didn't pick up on the Elementor being in the form of a broken wall when I was listening to it, and that may have just been because I was driving as well. So in my mind, I took that to be one of the Spirit of the Mountains, like a wild Spirit of the Mountain that Grombrindal was fighting. Mm-hmm. But I just hadn't picked up on that detail there.
Yeah, no, I one of my favorite details about this one was also the log that he kept. That was the log that was kept by his father. That was the log that was kept by his grandfather. Just a fun little note that was cool.
Yep.
There was a cool thing where he's setting up for camp for the day. He's getting ready to put those goggles on. And he lays out traps, and they're weird. They don't look like something that would catch the foot. I can't remember what the first thing, catch the foot of something, but the second item was like, it was like an Auroch or a Kurnothi. And I was like, oh, Kurnothi, there they are.
Yep.
Let's hold out hope for Aaron that we've at that point. So
exactly.
I mean, it's just a fun thing about Age of Sigmar lore is that there's all these little, like, oh, are they going to dig back into Kurnothi at some point? Like,
right.
They leave those things hanging and they're available for us and for them to come back to whenever.
Right. And really, I feel like this whole book was a culmination of Easter eggs, so it really played into that fun with the Warhammer lore.
Sure. Paul, do you want to take us to Protect with Honor?
Sounds good.
All right.
So we have a Caradon Overlord story next, and we are in Olgu. So again, one of these first stories that we've seen in Olgu as well. So we have this meeting of many KO captains sitting around a table on a skyship, and one of them is a Grunkor captain. And there is a mysterious box. And then they have a vote to open the box, which is unanimous.
I'm going to jump in. The Grunkor captain is specifically a captain of a gun hauler.
Yep.
So they're like, the other people are like, calling yourself captain, that's kind of grand for a two-seater. What do you call the other guy? And he's, I don't know. I got a kick out of that.
No,
and
great.
The guy took it totally in stride. He's like, yeah, I'm a captain of my ship. What's up?
That's the biggest ship the Grunkor has too. So it's like I'm an admiral. I got 3 of these.
Biggest ship they have that we see on the tabletop. I'm willing to believe that there's Grundstock, bigger Grundstock boats out there.
It's fair. Yep. Sounds good. So they have this mysterious box. They won't open the box, and then we have Thorngroom, which is the Klinkarn captain. Reaches into the box, and he acts like he's stung. And then weapons are drawn in response. And no one's fired, but the box is locked again. And then we cut to the deck of a different flagship. So we got this kind of like mysterious box that is propelling the story forward. So it's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we have this aforementioned gun hauler, and the gunner for the gun hauler, Hikram, is mysteriously missing. And we get this character, Whiskarn, She's got a white beard. Who's like, oh yeah, no, I'm so and so's third brother's 5 sisters, 7 third cousin.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Yeah.
And so they are going around providing escort for this frigate, this fleet, as it were. And turns out they are attacked in Olgu by a bunch of Order Serpentis on dragons, which is a cool moment.
Yeah.
And they want the box. So this gun hauler goes after one of the dragons, and they're supposed to be staying near the flagship, but Whiskarn in particular is like, no, we got to get this thing. Let's shoot, right?
Yeah.
And so they do slay the dragon, but now they've lost the fleet.
Yeah. And being lost is bad. Being lost in Ulgu is super duper bad.
And the gun hauler needs some repair as well. So
right. Their engine is leaking. They're barely hanging on to it. One of their supports got nicked. So they're low on fuel and not sure where they're at, and they've got to decide, give up or make a guess, or how are we getting out of here? How are we getting safe again?
Mm-hmm. And Brent, the captain, wants to run away, and Whiskarn is like, no, that's not what we're doing. So they're having a conversation about whether or not they should just crash here or crash somewhere else. Like, how are we actually dealing with this? But they do manage to find the fleet again, but minus the captain, who stuck his hand in the box, and his ship as well. And then we have dragons attacking again. We lose another ship, and then a Canary life taker lands on the gun hauler. Which causes them to crash land on the flagship itself.
I like this. It's like they're coming in for landing. It feels very like aircraft carrier style, right? Mm-hmm. Like you'd have this where damaged aircraft come in, land, and some of them ended up having to just get pushed over the side, on a conventional aircraft carrier. Like it had that taste of it to me, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah. And then the engine and the gun hauler are dead. And then, oh crap, Marathi's here.
Yeah, I love the reaction. Like it isn't just like, whoa, who could this be? Like the overlords are like, it's Marathi, we're screwed. Like they're like, what are we gonna do? But like, you can't just give up. You got to try. Mm-hmm. But turns out Whiskarn's got a little bit to him.
Yeah. So he runs to the flagship, and he managed to figure out a solution for the problem. So that's kind of our story. That's a quick in and out story. It felt like very much to me. So what are your guys' thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, so there were things I liked. So Marathi and Whiskarn, they like recognize each other. You know, they've encountered each other before.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I liked the banter in the gun hauler. Like I can see that little 2-seater because it's Whiskarn is like, I think we need to go this way, and Brent is like, well, why that way? And he says, I don't know, a feeling, an instinct, and Brent is like, well, I'd rather stake my life and ship on Dwarven science. And Whiskarn's like, would crashing over some other patch of Nakarth be so awful? Are you looking forward to crashing onto this bit for some reason I ought to know about? I was like, that's a good point. So it's a thing where he still engages as, if not an equal, at least like a peer maybe, rather than being like, hey, check me out. Like he finds a way to have those interactions. I did have a question. So we did actually get to see in the box, it was like a triangular artifact. When that one Dwarven reached in, it pricked his finger and there was a drop of blood that got absorbed into it. It's clearly valuable to Marathi. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Are we supposed to know what this is, Paul? or is it a mystery to you as well?
I didn't get the feeling that we were supposed to know what it was,
Okay.
but it is quite possible it just escaped my grasp as well. I'm not as well versed on the Daughters of Cain in specific, so
Yeah. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, Dune has entirely ruined any mysterious boxes that you reach into for me. So that was all I could think of.
fair.
It is, so they've crash landed on their on the ship, and I like kind of highlighting the enjoyable lines. Brent is coming down talking to the admiral, and he says, the admiral's like, "Well, that box is none of your business," and he says, "Well, I just passed Marathi on my way in here, and she wants it. So as of this moment, I'm making it my business. So better not complain if you want to make it back in one piece." And he's like, "The Shadow Queen's here on my ship. Yeah, my gunner's keeping her busy." Yeah, just like you do. And he throws the old line out where, because when he first meets Witzgarn and he's trying to place him, Witzgarn kind of passes it off. So he says, he's like, "My gunner's keeping him busy." "Hickram? No, Witzgarn." "Who's Witzgarn?" "From old Jaunty's boat. You know, old Jaunty." He doesn't. Nobody knows that. It's just something that he made up, but it's great. So, yeah. So I didn't get quite as much of the wisdom other than maybe like, hey, like sometimes hanging on to the treasure is, not worth it. Like you get your priorities right in the moment, I guess. But
I feel like there's a little bit of that when he's talking when they were lost and figuring out what to do, right?
Oh, that's a good point. Sure.
Honoring your oaths and like actually attempting to.
Yeah.
It's like, we lost them. We're done. Oh well, moving on.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that struck me about this is it does a good job of looking into kind of the legalistic decisions by committee type mentality that the Caradron have adopted. And I think by some regards, the Caradron are probably the most evolved or departed from old world Duarden.
Yeah.
And so Wiskarn's character in this is kind of a person who can give them a callback back to the core of their character, and take their attention off of just adventuring for profit.
Yeah.
And that there are other things that are other values that are deeper and stronger than just the next expedition or the next profit.
Yeah, no. And so moving on to the next one, Graveyard of Legends. So we're in Aramentia. So we're in the Great Parch. So this is the realm of fire. And we get some familiar characters for people who have read Black Library before. We get Malineth and Gotrek Gurnison, as well as a character called Whitrum. So we're mid-battle versus Nighthaunt, and we have a character called Dethin as well. Dethin Mardwid. Very, 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 very Welsh name. Thank you, David Guymer, for that. So they're in a battle, but Dethin is like messing around with some instruments that he's got laid out on the ground. Like he's like, "Malineth, Gotrek, you figure this out. I'm reading my instruments right now. Like there are more important things going on." And it turns out he's doing a survey of magic levels for the Whitefire Court. So he is measuring the magic around this specific area. And as the fighting is going on, all of a sudden the dials sink to 0, which is bad because he's making a survey and 0 shouldn't happen. And here we have Gotrek entering. And he promptly explodes with rage, and the waystone that Dethin is supposed to be taking measurements for cracks and falls. And he's just like, well, crap. There goes like a year's worth of work, because apparently what he's doing is measuring these specific waystones, and he's been doing this for a while. And we get another Dwarden entering, Whitrum, who has a white beard. Weird. So one of Dethin's instruments not only reads 0, but is also broken. So the real problem, though, seems to be, as opposed to what Dethin wants everybody to be concerned about, that there is some death magic rising where they are now. And the temperature starts to drop, and Witchram is like, we need to fix this now. That Waystone is here for a reason. And so they end up finding a pair of pillars that is around a tomb, and they meet a Dwarden Wraith Knight and his army. Now, this was interesting because I think we've read in a couple of battle tomes, or at least one in particular, where we've heard Grungy talk about hiding the Dwarden's souls from Nagash. So I think in particular, it talked about how Nagash could not find them, and Sigmar was asking Grungy how he had managed it. So it is not completely unique, but very irregular to have a Dwarden Wraith, as well as his fighters with him. And Witchram and Gotrek go to fight the dead Dwarden, and Witchram says, quote, "It's my debt to be honored," which is an interesting thing for him to say. And then Dethin gets Gotrek to the White King by pushing him into an oubliette realm and back out again, which always not a great choice, to throw Gotrek into another realm to get him back out again. And Witchram says they need to break the pillars, not get the White King. And it turns out that the pillars are overloaded by the Necroquake and now are not draining right. And so they enter the tomb and they strike Ringol's effigy and he disappears. The job is done.
Yep.
So that is the end of this story. Very action heavy.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Which Gotrek, so obviously.
Yeah. I love this one. So we've listened to Realmslayer and Realmslayer Part 2. I've just blanked out on the full name of it. Blood of the Old World. That's what it is. So we've listened to Realmslayer and Realmslayer Blood of the Old World multiple times, if for nothing else, to hear Brian Blessed portray Gotrek in just the most perfect fashion. But in Blood of the Old World, we're introduced to the Witchram character. That's where David Guymer first introduced that character without fully letting on that it was Grombrindal in disguise. But you have a couple of pieces of clothing, particularly his cloak, which we see show up in some of these stories as an identifying feature. And it sort of establishes this relationship between Gotrek and Witchram. So I think this story actually takes place. I don't know when it was published, but I think it takes place after Blood of the Old World. And so they've already met, but they're becoming, or they're re-encountering each other. One of the interesting things when I listened through it, I took the Dwarden whites to just be a White King and an army of Dwarden skeletons or a grave guard essentially. And the classic lore for whites is that they're like a possessed skeleton. So I guess I didn't understand it to be actual Dwarden spirits or souls inhabiting these, just that it was their bones that were reanimated by the realm of death and the Necroquake, and which of course is still a disruption from the norm because the Dwarden gods were supposed to have protected the Dwarden so that they could rest peacefully in death, and this has disrupted that, which we already talked about. The Necroquake has disrupted things everywhere. So here we're seeing another picture of that. And when they went in to the tomb and dealt with Ringol's effigy, there's a neat little throwback there, and I'm not sure if David Guymer did this on purpose, but if you go back and reread William King's Trollslayer, the first Gotrek novel, there's a scene where they go into a dwarven tomb and deal with a dwarven ghost of an ancestor, and the imagery here was very, very similar. It was, for me, a really fun callback of Gotrek once again going into a dwarven tomb and dealing with the restless dead and helping them find peace again.
That's cool. That's a connection I had not made. I read that, but probably, I don't know,
long time
20
ago.
years ago.
Yeah, years and years ago.
Yeah. Cool. Good find.
I do have a response to that, actually, Harry, but we have to talk about the next story to get that response. And first, I want to find out if Davy had any more thoughts.
No, I think you guys covered it. I may have said before, for whatever reason, and I've been trying to think of why. Maybe I'll find the words for it by the end of the episode. But Gotrek's never really been my favorite. I enjoyed the first few books in the old world. I think it's just like this godlike power without godlike intentions or something. It's hard for me to quite wrap my head around. And to be fair, I think I've read this and maybe one other short story with him in the Mortal Realms. So I'm not as familiar with his Mortal Realms exploits. But
well, to be fair, he is pretty much the worst slayer ever because he can't fulfill his goal.
Yeah. But I know a lot of people like him a lot, so I'm glad he's in there. And it feels like if you're doing a broad spectrum of Duarden in the Mortal Realms, it just seems only right and fitting to hit one of the most famous ones.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna call an audible here because this was the last White Dwarf story. So the last two stories here are bespoke to this book. So the last short story and the last novella. So I'm going to say, in contrary to what you just said, and I apologize, at the beginning of the episode, let's do a quick spoiler-free as to what we have heard now and what we can expect going forward for these last two stories. Because there's a decent chance that there's a lot of people that have read the White Dwarf stories but not read the rest of it.
That's fair.
If we're going to do a quick spoiler-free for these two, what would you guys have thoughts on? For me, one of them would be that we do deal with pretty much every Dwarden race again. So that's an interesting little aside if you're thinking about that. How about you, Davy? What would be a quick thought about what you would want to hear in the next one, or what people might want to know?
It's tough. It's tough to define what... you're going to get some origins. You're going to get some real big picture stuff. You're going to get some underlying mythology sort of things. Is I guess what I'd say. I recommended. I told Aaron, you should read this. You won't regret it, and he concurred with that assessment once he was done.
Right. Yeah, I think taking the White-Bearded Ancestor, the short story, and Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky, the novella, together as a pair. They both are culminations of the groundwork that was laid by the first short stories that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But they come at it from very different levels. So White-Bearded Ancestor is going to be that 50,000 foot mythological, without trying not to give any spoilers here, but it's a big picture. Hey, what's going on here? Oh, that's what's going on here. And then Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky is a ground level, nitty gritty. Here's how that's playing out, and here's how it all can tie together in one instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think both of those are fair. I just listened to the last Pocket Realms compilation, Davey. One of the things you guys talk about is that you like having stories that taught you something you didn't know before. Mm-hmm. And I feel like both these stories are going to teach us something we don't know before. The White-Bearded Ancestor in particular is a massive, it's a bunch of stuff I didn't know before, right?
Yeah.
And the other things that you guys talked about is like how a culture functions, or like different aspects of a culture that you hadn't heard before. Mm-hmm. And I think that we actually get a decent amount of that for Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky, which I thought was a fun little thing. The last thing is not a massive spoiler, but it is a slight spoiler. but I'll quick throw it in here because I think it is important, is that we have an ogre perspective in Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky.
Yeah.
It's actually relatively extensive. So if you are interested in ogres, I would definitely recommend reading Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky because there is some good ogreness in there. So
Very good. Yeah.
all right. So I'm going to go ahead and quick go into the spoiler phase for the last short story before I hand it off to Davy for the novella itself. So white bearded ancestor. So when you go through the list of characters, it's like, oh, these are all gods of the mortal realms. Got it. Which again, we've had a couple stories like this before, a couple short stories. And it's always super fun when you get these little, like you were talking about, 50,000 foot view. So we start off at a furnace, and we have grungy, and we've got some conversations going on. And we're at a ridgeline overlooking something called Skarn Karak. And the Fire Slayers are battling, and Grungy is wistful. So this is something we have not seen Grungy be before, to my knowledge. And we have a Lightning Zephyr speaking, and that's Sigmar. And so we get this this conversation between the two gods, and it's kind of like things are falling apart. And Sigmar's like, yeah, I could help you. And Grungy's like, yeah, no. That's not who I am, and that's not what I expect of my people.
And the Fire Slayers are fighting against Khornate Bloodbound, I believe, which I took to mean like this is the Khornate invasion of Akshi that we're seeing.
Yeah. And we do a quick scene change, and we're in Syar in Hish, like we were in the other story we have set in Hish. And we have some Dwarden fleeing their homes as they're destroyed. We make it to the top of the mountain, and there's a Whitebeard fixing a steam thingy. But he knows that Grungy is here, so we're getting a little bit different perspective of him. Then there's also an elf that can see him. They talk, and they know it's all ending, but the elf is also Teclis or Tyrion. I don't know. I don't remember which. Could be a good conversation. But
he refers to his brother who can see.
Yeah.
And so my son shouted out as we were driving down the road, "It's Tyrion!" Because he's very into Elvish lore.
All right. I will defer to your son then.
What's persisting through all this is that he's going unseen, right? Like he's all these places he's going. It's a rarity that anyone notices him.
Right.
He's choosing to go unseen throughout the realms.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he's being offered help from these other gods to help save the Dwarden in each little story. And then we have the Maker digging, and he's in the Bearded Dragon. And it's burned. We get another voice, and it's Nagash offering some kind of partnership, no. He's just being whiny, and we don't want to talk to him. So Grungy banishes Nagash and turns the bones of the Dwarden to lead so that Nagash cannot raise him, which I thought was a super cool little detail. Right.
And you see in there like a little bit of Grungy's attitude towards Nagash. And this occurs after the Pantheon has been broken up. And Nagash is referred to as the one who betrayed Sigmar.
Yeah. I mean, this is just you joke about Nagash being whiny. This is just a really fun, I mean, all these exchanges between the gods are really great reading. Like I loved every minute of these. And they talk to each other. Nagash is using a little bit more grandiose language. The dead are mine possessed, mine to do with as I will. That was the concession that all the Pantheon made to me long before the barbarian king ever raised his grand folly above Mount Celestian. We saw that back in Pantheon. And then his response is, "I keep my promises, old bones. I thought you knew me better than that." I love that he calls them old bones for, like it's because it's this thing of like they've known each other a really long time. So you can be casual with them. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Then we move on to Aramentia, which is where one of the other stories was. And it is falling, and only the white-bearded dwarden and his family are left. And the white-bearded dwarden is going to secure the grave of Ringol Magemaker, his grandfather. So turns out that story that we just read was him actually making sure his grandfather's soul was settled after the necroquake, which I thought was kind of cool. And then we have Karak Azaruk in Shaman, also being destroyed. And so Grungy is there, but he turns a falling pillar and he saves a group of Dwarden, and now a Lord of Change sees him.
Yeah, and they don't. I mean, it's great. Like the Dwarden don't know. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I thought we were toast," and like he doesn't even reveal himself. But like just in that moment, just his very presence is like holding things together. As the maker, which they refer to him as, like he prevents the unmaking of things just by his very presence.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a second here as because I think it's a demon saying, "I see you, see me. Here we are." Like, I think that's the Tzeentchian demon talking to him. I was trying to figure out what god it was, but then I realized it must be this demon that he's about to fight.
Yep.
Yep.
And then,
oh yeah, was that perhaps more apparent in the audiobook?
I think so. Yeah, I think that jumped out pretty clearly.
And then the Maker's body gets massive, and he just obliterates the Lord of Change. And the Maker grins as the first Caradron Overlords launch.
Yeah, what a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some references to the old Karaks in Shaman in the book Git Slayer. And this is one of the things that I've paid attention to ever since Age of Sigmar came out, is you've got the Fire Slayers with Kazakhs, you've got the Caradron with Baraks, and then any reference to Karaks are like mountain holds that they don't seem to inhabit anymore. And so there's references to these kind of like ruined places that are still referred to as Karaks from the Age of Myth or early in the Age of Chaos. So this was a neat reference where it's seeing one of those old Karaks being destroyed and the Dwarden are fleeing, and this group isn't going to Azir. They're going to become what we later on know as the Caradron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a super cool moment.
Yeah. What is it? He says, like, I don't know. It's just such a, like, when you realize what's happening, because I didn't recognize this moment for what it was, but until they were saying, like, until it was these airships. And I was like, oh my God, this is what's like, it's such an awesome moment. They had risen literally to the challenges of the era. They had outgrown their infancy and surpassed him, as he had known, hoped they would. It's like, oh yes. And this is like, this is the gamble he took by being the hands-off god.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Super cool.
Exactly.
And we've heard references to that in the battle tomes, right? You've heard reference to Grugny being at some point saying, "No, I can't stay here and help you guys in person because you won't grow into your potential."
Yeah.
I've got to go more hands off. I've got to go to Azir, whatever, because we know he goes on to help Sigmar in the creation of the Stormcast. So,
well, I tell you, if you want to hear more about Grungy and how he deals with being hands off with the Dwarden, you really want to have a read of the new Caradron Overlords Battle Tome. just gonna lay that out there. Might deal with that quite a bit.
I can't wait.
The story ends with the Maker back at his anvil, loosing ether gold with each swing, because that's where ether gold comes from.
Oh man!
And he is forging the legend of the white-bearded ancestor, and Grombrindal arises to right the wrongs of Grungy. It's like, oh,
not just
okay.
not just forging. They use the term reforged,
Yeah,
which there's the only place we've seen the term reforged in the lore so far was the Stormcast.
yeah,
And so here you have this idea that like Grungy invented reforging. He had the power all along. I'm not saying that Sigmar didn't bring something to the equation, but did he teach Sigmar how to reforge souls? Maybe.
yeah. There was definitely a lot of talk of how the first Stormcast that was part of the story, right? If I remember
Right.
correctly. Yeah. So, no, good point. Good point.
And there's a great moment at the end here. It's basically this is where the white dwarf, Grombrindal is kind of receiving his purpose from Grungy, and they're not quite peers, but they're closer to equals than others, right? In the way they talk to each other. But I really this is vying for that other line for some of my favorites. He says, "The Duarden have become strong through their trials, as I had always trusted that they would. But they've also become divided. It's time for them to feel my hand again, to remake that which was once whole. But we Duarden aren't so quick to forgive a wrong done to us, and the wrong I did to them was great indeed." And I was like, man, that is some cool self-awareness. Like he did what he had to do, but he knows it was tough. Like the toughest love, and it's gonna be tough. And Grombrindal has sighed and picked up his axe. Best make a start then, hadn't I?
Right, because Grungy knows that he can't fix it. Right,
yeah.
He broke it. He can't fix it.
Yeah,
but he hopes that Grombrindal can. My son hypothesizes that Grombrindal represents kind of like an avatar of the will of Grungy in the realms. Not unlike the way Gotrek represents an avatar of the will of Grimnir in the realms. But
unlike what is the guy with Galmaraz represents the avatar of Sigmar
in the realms, right? And so then the question remains: when are we getting our Grombrindal model?
Well, the bigger question, another question is because he says, the centuries have passed since the age of myth have been too long and bloody for them to follow me again, and Grimnir is not yet ready to return. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool.
Like to have almost nothing, and then we get a mention of Grimnir returning possibly, and then we get Tyrion talking in the same story. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Juicy. Yeah.
Such a fun story.
Yeah. I just talking about it, I'm like, I got to read this again. I really enjoyed this one a lot. So
right. I know I beat this drum too much on the Discord and on Twitter, but man, I really would love for them to do a combined Duarden battle tome, so that you could, not unlike the Auric battle tome, where you can take one of your three flavors if that's what you prefer, or you could do a combined Duarden army and take a little of each.
Well, your dream inches slightly closer to reality, possibly, in this final novella here, in the Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky. And you can kind of everyone can figure that little puzzle out for themselves. That's Dispossessed Fire Slayers and Caradhran Overlords. We have a cast coming at you. Primarily, so you have Strahl Aelson and Brig, daughter of Bregnar Grimnir. They're kind of a odd couple. They're having like a little bit of a tryst. It's a Caradhran and a Fire Slayer getting together, and the location we're at, Carag Daurkaz. It's at the very edge of the Spiral Crux, so we're in Shaman. I think I found that name meant Volcano Goodhall or something like that. So it sounds better in the Dwarven. And we have all three factions. So Dispossessed, led by Colram Dunrakul, Ale Dunsdottir, and Bragnar Grimnir. They all have different claims to this mountain, this Carag Daurkaz.
Right.
The Fire Slayers stayed throughout the Age of Chaos, kind of held on to the deepest parts of it. The Dispossessed left and then returned and captured back from the grots and other things infesting it, gained the upper parts, and then I think the peak of it itself is held by the overlords, and they all have like some sort of claim to it, be it we're the descendants of the people who are here and we never left, or the actual, like I have the better royal claim as Dispossessed, or I'm checking the contracts and the codes and it's actually me that owns it. So they're squabbling and infighting amongst themselves. And that is the backdrop for the approach of the Everwinter. Kind of disturbingly, they are actually in open conflict. There's a couple battle scenes where they're full on fighting each other. There's one where like a Fire Slayer is lopping a Arcanaut's hand off, and that hand fires the gun, shoots the Arcanaut in the foot. Like ooh, this is kind of gnarly. And we do see by several different names, I think Azakar, Gromrun, and Wiram Grombrindal is present, and he's present like simultaneously on both sides. So like when the Dispossessed are fighting the Fire Slayers, he's advising the kings on both sides like simultaneously. And it's a really cool bit of writing where it'll switch from like he'll say one thing over there and then it'll like switch over to the other perspective, and it's like flowing back and forth between the two sides. I really like how that was set up.
I don't know how it was in the written book, but in the audiobook, if you hadn't listened to the short stories to get those other names for Grombrindal, you wouldn't have immediately picked up on the fact that he was those characters, because they were all in advisor type roles, but they were different enough in their appearance and mannerism that you might not have picked up on it. But of course, we were introduced to all these aspects of him in the other stories.
So he is trying to diffuse the situation. He's not having much success here. And then all the time we get a hint that there's a storm coming. And the overlords are kind of perking up because I love this like meteorological talk here. Like it's such a great blend of sort of contemporary meteorology and like crazy AOS fantasy stuff. But this is pushing like these Aether Gold deposits ahead of itself. And so it's like here comes the perfect storm, there's a great haul to be had for anyone willing to dare this like insanely intense blizzard. And Ale Dunsdottir is she's like, it's there's no reward without risk. We're gonna make this happen. Kind of assemble a fleet, and they have the freedom to do this thing where they describe different Dwarden sky ships that we don't see in the game. Like a converted tanker here that couldn't possibly carry all this, but it's going to carry much more than anyone else could scoop up. This is the point where our antagonists, I mean, besides the Dwarden themselves, they're kind of antagonizing each other just fine without the ogres. Thank you very much. But Sharpa Longtooth shows up, and it takes actually a while before I was a little confused about who's actually leading this. It took a while before I realized that Sharpa has he's a Blizzard speaker. Do you remember what his title was?
Yeah, a Blizzard speaker is what you have done here. So it's a Frost Lord.
Yeah.
So the Rockbelly. Yeah.
There's a Frost Lord. Stormer Rockbelly is like the actual leader, but Sharpa is the Blizzard speaker. And so he's kind of the spiritual advisor, I think, where he can channel and speak to the Everwinter. And they have this big collection of Beast Claw and Gutbusters and Bone Splitters and Iron Jaws and Cruel Boys, all trying to stay ahead of this Everwinter. And they've actually they've gone in and stolen something from the Everwinter itself. They've hauled this huge ice block out, and for a little while it's a mystery, and then you come to realize it is a old Frost Lord, Borgia Kragenfrier, who may or may not have been present for like one of Gorka Morka's last big stomps, wogs around. Sjarpa himself is extremely old. Possibly, I don't know. It was a little confusing, and it's not like the ogres are like keeping great historical records, but he's extremely old, and this ogre in the ice block was a mentor to him, kind of taught him what he knew, and so they're completing the Maw Path, which they're looping back around like this 1,000-year loop, and they're coming back and arriving back at the same mountain that the Duarden are fighting over, because it might just be hot enough to melt their prize out of its block of Everwinter ice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is a fun, this is a different approach to writing ogres than I had seen before. I also really appreciate the similarity between Sjarpa ends up being one of the main characters, right? So we have the main characters being advisors on both sides of this story. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a cool way of doing that. And they both are smarter than they should be, right? And they both are they would be better in charge, but realize that they don't want that responsibility, and like they can't force it upon anybody else. So
yeah,
to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sjarpa does make some moves. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I just love, so he gets challenged at one point because they're like, hey, so I think somebody's like, hey, we took this from the Everwinter and the Everwinter wants it back. Like this Borgia needs to go back in. And so they brawl, but it ends up not even being to the death. Like he just starts telling a story, and they're like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. It was unexpected for me. I was like, well, obviously this challenger is going to die, and it'll be like, hey, look, Sjarpa is really powerful. But I was like, no, like he's got this kind of charisma to him, which is pretty cool.
And he loves this story.
Yeah, he does.
That was the interesting thing that they brought out about ogres, is that they love stories, and they're just filled with, obviously insatiable hunger, but the way they humanize that, I don't know if you should use humanize with ogres, but they did. It was like they don't choose to be hungry. They don't necessarily enjoy always being hungry, but they are always hungry, and they have to pursue that.
Right. Meanwhile, Strahl, that Caradhran, he's kind of the adopted son of Ale, the female Duarden who is in charge of the Overlords faction. He hasn't really been good at anything that he's done so far. Like he's still trying to find his place. He is trying to figure out a marriage contract. That's kind of this love story between him and Brig. But he ends up going on this expedition. Like he's going up with the fleet to try and make this big haul. And I should find it. There's a pretty good exchange he has with the admiral who's sort of in charge of this expedition. This guy's like, why exactly should I be? He's like, no doubt you attended one of the prestigious Skyfleet colleges then. He's like, no, this is my first time being gone from Barak Nar. It's like, oh, well, you must be like really experienced on a ship. And he's like, not really. He's like, you must know all about being like on an icy deck. He's like, no, not really. He says, so help me understand why you are even getting to come to like be on my ship or help commandeer my ship. And Strahl is like, well, you owe my mother a lot of money. And Helmundson was silent a while, then issued a salute. An honor to sail under you, Strahl Elson. May your command be short and profitable. I was like, yes, so cool. Yeah.
I like Beautiful. That a lot because it very much brings to the fore that the Caradhran are a meritocracy, right?
Absolutely.
Like this guy hasn't done anything, But it was also really, really reinforced by the fact that the only reason he's on the ship to begin with is because his mother is like, I need somebody to watch over what's going on. But I need somebody that if they die, it won't be the end of the world. All right. My son's pretty terrible at everything. Yeah. So I'm gonna send him on the boat because, like, I mean, he is my son, so therefore he carries weight. And like it kind of talked about how the only reason that she has a son is because she wants somebody for her money to go to. Like she wants to be in charge of where her inheritance will go eventually.
How heartbreaking was it that she didn't even read the marriage contract that he brought to her?
And it is like, this is the most important thing. And like she's like, I sign contracts on Tuesdays. What day? Right. It's not a Tuesday. I'm not signing contracts on Tuesdays. Thursdays? Are you crazy?
Like,
It was really well done.
Meanwhile, back in the mountain, there's the aftermath of the fight. Notable here, they're kind of licking their wounds and they're verbalizing some of their resentments. There is a priestess who is stitching up the king. And the goddess whose icon she bore on a chain around her neck was reputed to be dead and a long time dead, but the priestesses of the dispossessed would need a better reason than that to change the robes they wore and the prayers they sang. So tip of the hat to Valaya.
Yep.
Not named, but we know.
Yep.
There it's same thing where, you know, they're wrapped up in their grievances against each other. The fires, there's like they call the star spoiled Unbaraki, which is Oathbreaker in Khazalid. Pretty rough thing to call somebody from their perspective. So more squabbling, not getting too far with that. Then that fleet gets beset by the storm. So it's up there and it gets hit and it's bad, right? Like they can't see where they are. They need to figure out how to navigate. So the ship that Straw's on goes down below the storm, tries to get a reading. Like, let's figure out where we are. Comes out from under out of the clouds and discovers this big horde of ogres coming in, and like, their semaphore signals are not getting through the storm. And so Straw actually innovates here. He uses a turret. He jumps. There's like a little belly gun turret. Which I like this sort of B-17 style reference. Yeah. He gets in this and he uses it to fire as like 3 long bursts, 3 short bursts, 3 long bursts. So SOS, right? Yeah. But it's a warning in hammer tongue, quote unquote hammer tongue. It was a callback to like dispossessed style. So like the things they share where you would like, you can't see each other, but you can communicate by tapping hammer, tap through the caves. So he's trying to use that to like send a warning, like danger, enemies present up to the fleet up in there, hoping somebody sees that.
Yeah, because what's obvious to us as the reader, but not obvious to them, is that the reason that this weather system is moving forward is because the Everwinter is following the ogres, and that's what's pushing the Ether Gold through. But they don't quite realize that, it's actually the ogres that are bringing this storm. And so until this point, they're just like, this is my land. No, this is my land. No, this is my land. Yeah. Oh, but there's gold. Yeah. So I'm going to send people out to do this gold, but also fight over my land. And oops, there's an enemy army on our doorstep. Well, crap. Now what do we do?
So this, Grombrindal is still trying to fight the good fight, trying to get these guys together, trying to rally them, make them recognize the danger soon enough. And so you have this I think it's like chapter 10 where it keeps introducing like so-and-so considered himself a sensible Dwarden, and it would be like, this time we're talking about a dispossessed, this time we're talking about a fire slayer, and like what they happen to be doing when they're quote unquote sensible is like wildly different. Like one is like flying through an ice storm, one is actively like berserker raging, one is in a small cabin, and there's a Grombrindal gets to be like flying a gyrocopter in one of these, it was fun to see a gyrocopter in there. And he's trying to warn people, trying to get people together. There's the light the warning fire, all that sort of thing. But the ogres do have some cannons thanks to the Gutbusters, and managed to shoot down the craft that Mistral is aboard.
Dum dum dum.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back in the mountain, the different factions of Duarden are kind of squabbling, but they get themselves together, and there's a cool the kind of cliffhanger of the end of chapter 11 going into chapter 12 is that the ogres have come to parley. He comes, holds hands up. I'm not armed. He's got like a raggedy white thing tied to the end of a stick. And this is like we were talking about, like Harry, you were talking about them, for lack of a better word, humanizing these ogres. And
Yeah.
do you remember kind of this cycle that he's talking about? Like what his angle is in this?
Are you talking about Sharpa or?
Yeah, Sharpa. Well, like how does he go about, like what's his pitch to the collected heads of the Duarden?
Oh, right. So they had allegedly come to an agreement the last time the Maw Path circled around that if the Duarden would provide food and shelter, they wouldn't fight and they wouldn't be eaten. Mostly they want warmth and shelter. Is the main thing. The ogres are followed by this Everwinter, but they don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy the cold. They want heat, and they know that in this mountain, they have, I think they called it Grimnir's Forge, like this source of heat that's just unbeatable, right?
Right.
And so that's what they want. They want to take shelter from the Everwinter, and they want to enjoy this heat. And that if you'll just let them in, they're not gonna eat you.
Yeah,
Sounds a little bit like the big bad wolf and the little pigs, but
But apparently that's, so they're saying that's how they went. And what I love is the different way that the different Duarden factions respond to this. So the Firestars are like, hell no, we'll kill you. Like, let's throw down, let's fight. The Dispossessed are like, well, okay, let's check the books. And like, oh, it does look like there's an agreement. Well, we gotta honor our agreements. And then the Overlords, Ale, is going through, and she's like, is she a code right? She is a code right?
Yep.
Like this is, so she's a code right, and she is like, well, actually, on this technicality, she's like, statute of limitations on this agreement, or like, is this guy still alive? Because if none of the people who actually made the agreement are still alive, then it's void. Like going in that, so they all three like approach this and come to kind of different conclusions. But as you can predict, because this is a Black Library book, it's going to break down into horror. So,
Yep.
I was even just a little disappointed when Sharpa came back, and they're like, hey, what's up? Like, did you get us in? And he's like, they said they needed time to talk about it. And they said, I can't believe you said you'd let him have time. He's like, I lied. I was like, oh, Sharpa, you lied, man.
Just getting to
Seemed like one of the good ones.
Yeah. But then it's fighting, and even now, like the Duarden can't quite hold it together. The Fire Slayers charge instead of holding the line. There's a pretty cool fight where Bregnar Grimnir, he's on his Magmadroth going up against the Frost Lord, Sturmer Rockbelly. So it's a Magmadroth versus Stonehorn battle, and although Bregnar lays some good licks on the Frost Lord, he goes down, gets speared through by an ice spear, and kind of dies. And his last thing is like trying to spot his daughter, see if his daughter made it out, but he doesn't see it. Like he's as he vision fades, you can see his forces retreating. The ogres keep pushing up, and they end up getting to the top, and this is another time where Grombrindal is there, and he's like, hey, look, like, I know it's a Duarden thing to like stay and fight, but like, it's time to, sometimes you got to pick your fights, and this is one of those times. And Colrum's like, hell no, I'm staying, I'm fighting. And you get this good line: "You're a stubborn fool, Colrum, but you're Duarden right enough, for better or worse." And that's, again, that kind of wisdom of knowing the weaknesses. Colrum
had thrown down the oath stone.
Yeah,
and swore an oath that he would not take any step back from that.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
And there, you see a direct reference to the model
Yep.
of the
in the 8th edition
blanked out on.
too. From Wayne,
Right.
Fantasy.
Right.
But like, I do love that, like, when they were in the hall with the Civil War previously, he's like, he throws down the oath stone. Like, we should stop fighting. I threw down my oath stone. Like, no, this is stupid. You're going to die for no reason. But I threw down my oath stone.
Yeah. It's like, you don't get how this works. That's the oath stone.
I can't back down now. I threw down my oath stone.
Yeah.
But I had one other quick thing. I thought that the battlefield here was kind of cool, because they talked about it being this overlapping series of defenses that led up into the main door of the hall itself. So it wasn't just like, oh, we're on a battlefield and it's straight across, and it's like, no, we're actually fighting up and down the walls and through these different sets of defenses. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Right. And they talked specifically about the gates. Like, they talk like siege theory in here, like the weakest part of a fortress being the gates. And so, but not this one, because the gates were like some ridiculous thickness that they created, because they knew that was going to be a problem. So they prepared for it.
Yeah. And the ogres, like, again, if you want to empathize with them, like, they're stuck. Like, if they're slowing down to commit to the siege, they are really literally getting themselves between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
The Everwinter's pressing in. And so they have this urgency. It's like, we cannot wait. We got to go now. We got to make it happen. Colrum ends up facing off against the Frost Lord, and courtesy of the damage that Bregnar inflicted, is able to kill the Frost Lord. In what was one of the grosser scenes in anything I've read in Black Library in a little while. I think he's like sawing. He gets his axe into the Frost Lord, is sawing into him, and there's like all this fat is just like gooshing out, and the Frost Lord's so hungry he just starts eating it. I'm like, oh no, yuck, super yuck,
so gross.
So he kills Drockbelly and then is promptly dispatched by Sjarpa. Sjarpa's like, glad to have this. Earlier is like, man, like the leader of the Fire Slayers didn't finish off this Frost Lord. If anyone was going to do it, it's going to be him. And although they didn't know they were, kind of working together, they were. The two, Bregnar and Colrum, kind of combined to take out this Frost Lord. But not only is Colrum killed, but he's like stomped into paste as the Stonehorn moves on. So the ogres are at the very gates. Meanwhile, down in Grimnir's Forge, where, shock of shocks, it is snowing, which is kind of unthinkable in this hottest of places. The White Duarden reveals himself like in his true form, and everyone's everyone's like, oh my god, like it's just like an ancestral memory. Like as soon as they see him, like kind of revealed for not just Azakar or Wiram or Gromrun, they know who he is. And it's this thing where like it's this cool thing where like he kind of shifts back and forth between all these, like your vision is swimming a little bit. But if he showed up, it's your time of need. Meanwhile, outside, Strahl is working. He's got a 20-something Arcanauts, and they're working their way back. He runs into Grombrindal, who in this scene like gives him a cloak. He sees something, and Strahl is like, you've got a chance to like help me out. There's a cool scene where now Straw's got the cloak on. He's like, oh man, feels so much better. And it's kind of warming him, and he looks over and he says, "Oh, you're cold." Like you can see Grombrindal's got goosebumps, and Grombrindal's like, "Yeah, so I am." And he's like, "No, but I mean, you are cold. Like, how cold can like it's got to be darn cold if you can get cold."
Well, they'd been overtaken by the Everwinter at this point,
Yeah.
and they're struggling to make their way back through it. And I thought this scene was really, really cool because one of the first hints that David Guymer gave about Grombrindal when he introduced him as Wittram in Blood of the Old World was he put his cloak on, I think it was Malameth in that story, and instantly she felt as if she was right next to a roaring hearth fire. So it was a magical cloak that warmed you as if you were sitting right next to a great fireplace.
Yeah.
So then to see him throw this cloak on Straw, like if you read that other story, hey, this is that same guy.
Yeah. And meanwhile at the gates, they're getting ready to smash it down, and Grombrindal appears and he confronts Sharpa, and he's just chatting with him, like just casual conversation. And he's almost like he's marveling at the ingenuity of the Noblars, right? I think he even announces him like you're gonna actually, if you really want to do this job, here's the tool you need. Like you're gonna want whatever for that. And Sharpa's looking around. I was like, "Am I the only guy who sees this dude? Like, what's up with this? Like, does no one else see this guy? Is this a spook?" And they start throwing down, and Grombrindal's kind of pushed to his limit. He's taken on Sharpa and like the whole retinue up there. He's like, obviously, like there's nothing this guy can do. And Grombrindal, there's an awesome moment where he swings his axe, and Sharpa hears like the impact. He's like, "LOL, like you're not gonna break a Stonehorn's leg." And then all of a sudden, the Stonehorn just starts flopping over, crying out in pain. And Sharpa's like, "I've never heard that before." Slides across. And he's really getting pushed to his limit. Even for him, this is kind of a big fight, and that's where Straw's crew comes to the rescue, and they come in, guns literally ablazing, and give him the opening. And there is a cool death scene here where Sharpa is like coming through, and the Everwinter is right upon them, like it is caught up. It's right here now, and he has really put it to Grombrindal, and he's noticing my legs are going numb. I'm having trouble walking. And Grombrindal, it's not like gets him with a final axe blow. He's like, "Hey, look, like, let me tell you a story." And Sharpa's like, it gets into his inner monologue, and he's like, realize that's all I really wanted. This is the thing he wants most in this moment is the story. And I don't know if you notice this, you guys, but the story he starts telling, he says it began at the deathbed of a high king. And this is one of the rumored origins of the white dwarf himself in the world that was.
Nice.
Wow.
He was the last high king to receive the honor. He was like a friend of Malekith before Malekith broke bad. He was the last high king to receive like the honor due to him, I think is how it was said by the Elven nations. So like pre-sundering, like not sundering. That's
War of the Beard.
Yeah, exactly. And on his deathbed, like he tries to, make them promise to remain allies, and that obviously doesn't hold true. But that it all began on the deathbed of a high king. I was like, there it is, yes. Wow. So, if
nothing else, you can imagine that he told the story of the War of the Beard to Sharpa, which is an incredible story.
Yeah. And then we switch down into the forge where Brig has been selected to be the ruler. They come back up. They find Grombrindal frozen in ice, dead, but with a smile on his face. Straw has somehow survived thanks to the cloak. And two twists. And I don't know what you guys think about this decision, but they're like, well, we stick to our oaths. They actually bring Borgia inside, like the big frost lord that is inside the like the one from 1,000 years ago.
Mhm.
Like we're going to stick to it. I mean, I guess if you just bring one, the rumor is that he's so massive, so fat that he can't move. So I guess maybe you're safe. I don't know. They're going to bring him in and thaw him out. And although Grombrindal died, there is a Hearthguard with just a hint of white in his beard. And I'm like, oh, there he is again.
He's been reforged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is Lords of Stone, Fire, and Sky.
Mm-hmm.
What further thoughts do you guys have on this one?
I really liked the battle scene versus the ogres, because they had we kind of didn't touch on it, but they had the Karajan overlords and the dispossessed and the fire slayers all fighting in the same battle line.
Mm-hmm.
I thought was kind of cool. They were talking about where they were on the battlements and how they were reinforcing each other, and watching each of them separately fight together and fail independently. I thought was a really interesting and well-written way of talking about what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing all the different flavors of Duardin fighting together as a force, and just the intricacies of their cultural differences, but how underlying all that was just their common Duardinness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I thought it worked really well as and you said this, Harry, that it was it pulled together like the other short stories that had kind of set the plate for this. I thought that was
absolutely.
That was a really good way of thinking of it. I don't think I thought of it that way until you kind of said it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that actually really pulls together well. So, all right. Well, Aaron might do this in a particular order, but he's not here. We have the wheel, so I'm gonna jump to listener questions, and I'm gonna hit our kind of end questions here. So, this one's from Klaus Ma, a patron of the show. Thank you, Klaus. Does Grombrindal get more character and purpose beyond acting as a Deus Ex Machina? What do you guys think here? And then the follow up is his journey from the old world to the mortal realms a meaningful one, and has he changed? Any thoughts on this?
The first question, absolutely. He's evolved beyond Deus Ex Machina. I think the entire story of this book was him evolving, where he came from, why he's acting the way he is, and like especially since we now have 3 Dwarden races, he has to evolve, right? Because we only had one in the old world, besides Chaos, right? And he's not going to be with the Chaos Dwarden. So his character had to evolve in order to allow this. And like, it kind of feels like, like this is being dismissive, but for, I think, a good reason. It kind of feels like he's a cosplayer that just like shows up and like, but you always know it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy that's the cosplayer. And he's just got little different pieces of himself, like little different pieces of runes or little different pieces of jewelry or weaponry. But he always seems to have exactly what he should. And so I thought that was a really fun touch for his character, and definitely made him feel not nearly as much of a Deus Ex Machina or a superhero that comes in to save the day, as it were.
Right. And you touched on this, how now the Duardin have at least 3 very distinct expressions in the mortal realms from the way they were portrayed in the old world. And so you couldn't have Grombrindal just be the way he was in the old world. Whereas before, he was this mysterious figure who would show up in the time of need, but he was always just like the white dwarf. He was the archetypical old dwarf. Yeah. And now he had to be reinvented in at least 3 different expressions. And we see even more than that. And the way they handled that in each of the individual stories, and then also in the white bearded ancestor, where they give a little bit of the mechanical, like, how is this possible? Yeah. It was really, really clever, and it fits right into the flavor and the setting of the Age of Sigmar, the mortal realms, where you've got it's stories of epic tales and the gods and myths becoming real, in the daily lives of the characters. It very much made it a believable part of the lore.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me is it wasn't just like I'm there in your time of need. I'm the, to use your word, Harry, the archetype of the Duarden race, but he's here to do the thing that Grungni assigned him to do, which is to help the Duarden help themselves.
Yeah.
To like recognize their own weaknesses and address those.
In a sense, you could almost imagine if they wrote a character for him, he couldn't be your general.
Mm-hmm.
In the Age of Sigmar game, like he's not there to take charge of any of the armies. He's there to enhance them, to help them, to in a way help them be their best Duarden selves, whatever that expression may be.
Yeah. And this is something that kind of like, it was silly in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, was that we got all these different versions of the White Dwarf. And there was like a White Dwarf in space. There was a White Dwarf witch hunter. There was a White Dwarf pirate. Like, there were all these different expressions, right? But like, this novel actually makes all of those believable. Like, I can now picture in my mind, what would a White Dwarf pirate have been like? Like, it would have been Slayers and he would have done this thing.
Yeah.
And in the old world, he literally just was this figure. He's wearing this specific suit of armor. He has this specific axe. He has this specific thing, right? Like, and this is exactly what he looks like. And
right. And you have to remember, White Dwarf as a title was their magazine that came out way back at the very, very beginning, before Warhammer Fantasy Battles had even really coalesced into a game system the way we know it. Yeah. And so it's always been this term that they kept because it was both sci-fi and fantasy. And then it grew into this character, and now they've solidified it into an actual believable part of the lore.
Yeah. Well, and so to answer that second part of the question, is his journey from the old world to the mortal realms a meaningful one? I would definitely say yes, because as opposed to most other characters where they're just kind of like, they might show up or something happens to bring them back, right? This was an intentional choice, kind of like Eltharion, which I appreciated the way that Eltharion's character came back as well, because it was like, Teclis was like, no, I want him. Like, this is the person that I want, and went on a quest to go and grab him. And so it's the same thing here, where Grimnir was like, no, I need him. I need this person to help me. And he forged him. So that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. We have quite a few questions from Dog Tired, friend of the show. I'm going to hit, we'll hit these. How did you all feel about the Beastclaw villain? I surprisingly liked him. I'm going to speak for all of us. I think we liked him. I think we enjoyed the different facets. I think he had a really nice arc where his ending was not just getting killed in a gruesome way. I thought that was cool. So thumbs up there. That's one of the things that when Josh Reynolds was writing for Black Library, I always liked about his books is the compelling villains.
Right.
Was it Ghost Eater comes to mind? There was like a beastman in one of the in Black Pyramid maybe that I thought was great.
I would go so far as to say, like, I think this is my favorite ogre that I've read in Black Library.
Sure.
It's a great perspective and like really fleshed out character. Get it? Because he's an ogre.
Here's another one, and so what is Grombrindal's actual limits, i.e. he will get involved with A, B, but not C? How powerful is he? And I think we don't know. We know that there are some limits. He appears exhausted. He can only, he talks about, you brought it up, like the cost of him staying with the ale, not alewife, the brewer. But I think it's important that we don't know, right? Like, he did die. He came back. We don't know if coming back he has some limit to his power. Did he die there? But he's actually existing somewhere else at the same time. Some of the fun of this character is that there's mystery about him, and I like that it's not all laid out.
Right.
Here you go. We'll start with Paul. Who would you feel worse about disappointing, Gotrek or Grombrindal?
Oh, obviously Grombrindal. Like Gotrek's going to be disappointed in you no matter what you do.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Either be an idiot or you didn't bring enough beer, so you're an idiot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Or he just doesn't care about you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Grombrindal is like the guy he's the parent you really don't want to disappoint. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Harry, let's see. Well, so there's one here I can manage this one. Why don't Beast Claws just get Magmadroth mounts? There is kind of this cool thing where like the Magmadroth, there was even down in Grimnir's Forge, like this one Magmadroth is it's a Briggs, I believe, and this Magmadroth almost dies because she gets so cold. So I don't think they could hang out that close to the Everwinter and not get sick and die.
Yep, they would get dormant or die. Yeah, agreed.
Right.
But Harry, if your ancestors stood watch over your beer brewing, what flavor would they add?
Ooh. That's a tough one.
I mean, you can't use Clinkenberries because he already used that one.
Right. That's what I was thinking. No, I'm going to say we'll go with a West Texas favorite of mesquite.
Ooh,
nice.
Wow. All right. Paul, what about you?
I don't know. And I've never done any brewing myself, but I think I'd probably like something strong or different, like maybe some anise or something like that.
Okay, cool.
Get some actual flavor, a strong flavor in there. So see how that works.
I'll regret this because I'm only good for about one or two of them, but I did enjoy myself a ruby red shiner when I was living in Texas. So get a little, especially this time of year, little ruby red grapefruit.
Yes.
That's to just kind of give you some freshness in there. So let's see. I think we got our last one here. Boy, what movie are Tyrion and Grungni watching and broing out about? What movie are Tyrion and Grungni watching that leaves them both in tears?
I got an answer for both.
Okay,
well, go for it.
Is the
can stand for it.
The PBS documentary of the War of the Beard?
All right,
It's got to be like 12 hours long.
That's the answer to both of them.
It's the answer.
The answer to both of them.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, it's the Ken Burns documentary of the War of the Beard.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I like it. Thank you, folks, for sending in some questions for us. We have our regular ones. There's one that's in what shape are the characters at the end, the settings. I think that what we're really asking about it, what shape is the Duarden of this mountain at, and then possibly Duarden as a whole, because you assume like this sort of thing is kind of playing out on a in many locations at this point, right? So what are your take of the setting or the characters at the end of this?
I don't know how much of this is my reading of it and how much of this is my projection onto the story out of just sheer wish listing, but I see the hand of Grombrindal in reuniting the three flavors of Duarden. So there is potential there for a combined Duarden Aleholds battle tome.
Yeah, for sure. Aleholds, love it. Paul, anything to add to that?
To me, the characters and the setting are definitely a more optimistic. I feel at the end of this, and specifically for the Duarden. But again, I feel like I need to say that this really feels like a prequel to Grungy coming back, right? And in particular, and I'm going to reference it again. The new Caradron Overlord's Battle Tome really is going to go in and like explore some more of those themes and what's going on. It's not going to be for Grombrindal, but it's going to be for Grungy and the Duarden in general. So,
oh man,
it definitely feels like there is an intentional choice to inject optimism back into the Duarden race, which is something that we just haven't seen. Right. Like, and it's interesting that they've always been a depressing race or a negative race, right? In Age of Sigmar, because the Fire Slayers, our god died, but we're still fighting, right? The Caradron, our god left us, but we're still fighting. The Dispossessed, we lost everything, but we're still fighting, right? And this makes them not one dimensional in my mind, right? This gives them a facet of hope, which I think every race should have, right? So
yeah. And I'll go one step further. And again, might be wish listing here, but I feel like in the game, what Fire Slayers and Caradron Overlords have really lacked is an identifiable hero character that's part of the lore.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Lumineth have Teclis and the Daughters of Cain have Marathi and, all the death factions, well, except for Flesh Eater Courts. The other death factions all have a variety, Manfred and Neferata and, of course, Nagash. With lots of even the Auric, they have Gordrak and then Kragnos, for the destruction factions.
Yeah.
But with the Duarden, we just haven't really had, other than Gotrek, which when he gets introduced to the game, it's kind of he's Duarden, but any Order army can take him. He's not really there to embody the character of one or more of those armies. Whereas Grombrindal, through these stories, you see a way in which he could do that.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, another thing we like to do is ask you, who was your non-gender specific dude? Who is somebody in the story that you either identified with or really enjoyed or qualified however you want? But who would you pick? Paul, you have anyone picked out?
I do. And as opposed to usually when they do these and it's like, this little character in this thing, like my dude is totally Grombrindal. Like we never pick the main character. It's always a side character. It's always, like this little thing. But like for me, it was him. Like
it is a little gauche of you, Paul, but we'll go ahead.
I know, right?
But to be fair to Paul,
yeah,
he is the side character in every story, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed his character and all the different ways in which he interacted and like all the little details about what he was wearing, right? Like all the little ways in which he impacted the story. And I just thought it was great. So totally my dude.
Yeah.
Harry, how about you?
For me, I'm going to go with, I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Helga Hrevensdottir. The Rune Mother in the first story was just full of character, full of strength and determination, just as strong-headed as any other Fire Slayer character we've seen. Mm-hmm. And again, just very inspiring to read her story or hear her story, and made me want a model for that character or that type of character in the game.
Totally.
I love when you read a Black Library novel and it just makes you want to work on a model or an army. And that character definitely did that for me.
Sure. For me, I really thought hard about making it Grungni because I enjoyed that white bearded ancestor so much. And I really think Grungni might be my favorite of the Pantheon after reading that. But in the tradition, I will pick a smaller character. I really like, there was just, it was in there just for a hot second. There's this character, Borin. He was, his job to man this like lookout post and light the watchtower. And he's like struggling to get up there to get it lit. And he's like, I could run, but I didn't bring my family to this crappy little shack for the last 30 years just to fail on my oaths right now. And it was just another great moment where Grombrindal shows up because he's having trouble getting a light started. And Grombrindal's like, need a light? that appears there. And but I just really like, the story of the little guy in the face of this like big impossible thing, like this
Right.
little small act of defiance. I really like that a lot. So,
right. And there was one scene. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
There's one other scene that just, it wasn't even that influential to the story, but was entertaining. And it's when they first introduced the ogres in the Lords of Stone, Fire and Sky. Is they've got two fire slayers running through the snow at them, and they're melting the fire, like the heat from their runes is just melting the snow as they run.
Yes.
And in the audiobook, one of the ogres is just like, spicy. Because he's excited to eat these fire slayers.
Yeah.
It was just hilarious.
That brings us to kind of our last question. What did we learn about the Mortal Realms that we didn't know before, or any other comments? I'm going to make it just a general thing. What did you learn, and what other last thoughts do you have about the Grombrindal Tales of the Wanderer? Paul, we'll start with you.
I really like the idea that Grombrindal came from the realms. He had a grandfather. He had kids. Like I really like that. That's not something we have from pretty much any of these god level characters. So I thought that was super cool.
For me, it's got to be the art of reforging, and how we see that Grungni has that ability. And it made me wonder, will we see any other reforged Duardin characters?
Oh, interesting. Sure. For me, new things. It was just so many little bits and pieces about the culture of these different factions. So, even the Beastclaw Raiders, this idea of the Maw Path and such, but all those pieces together, the ritual for a newborn rune son and all those together. I love anytime they get into details of like the nitty gritty of Caradhran overlords, like where they're talking contracts and talking like, and it's just like catnip to me, where they start, salting in aeronautical and naval terminology and just finding a way to like kind of interlace that with what they're doing. And so every time I get just a little piece more, that's another thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. I guess, Paul, we usually rate these, right? I don't see that question here. Have we not been rating these? Okay.
No, we definitely do. It's just
okay.
Aaron got a little lazy. That's all.
Oh wow! Yikes! I believe in you, Aaron. You're awesome. So Harry, this will get you maybe a little bit by surprise. We usually do some pick your own custom rating.
Right.
Paul, what would you rate this? How would you rate this?
I would give this 7 of 8 spider legs. I really enjoyed it from beginning to end. So even reading it for the second time didn't bother me at all. So I have to give it a high rating for sure.
Sure. Harry, what about you?
Sorry, I'm counting all the names for Grombrindal in here.
I love it.
And I think I'm at 7.
Okay.
Am I off here?
Well,
that seems pretty good.
There's Grombrindal, there's the White Dwarf, the Ancestor, and then there's the 6 names that he goes by in the short
There's 6
stories.
names in this,
and then the 3
stories?
names he goes by in the novella, right?
But the novella repeats.
Yeah, exactly. That was a cool thing.
So I would go 8 or 9.
8 or 9. So I will give it, because there's probably one that hasn't been written about yet. I'll give it 10 out of 10 names for Grombrindal.
Oh man, very nice. I will give it 950 out of 1,000 years on the Maw Path.
Nice.
And 300 of those years alone are just for the white bearded ancestor. Which
absolutely.
Just incredible. Just great.
Yeah.
Very enjoyable up and down. I'm going to pass it around one last time for any last thoughts. I got one more thing that kind of popped into my head right at the end here. But Paul, you got anything?
Yes. If you like Grombrindal, if you like reading about the White Dwarf, there is actually another short story in the current White Dwarf that is by a different author. So not by David Guymer, but it is the start of a new serial series in White Dwarf about the White Dwarf. So
Perfect.
That's exciting.
Just read it.
Harry, any last thoughts for you?
No, I think I've already shared, just how exciting this book was as far as hope for a combined Duardin force and the ability to bust out all my old dwarf models along with the new dwarf models or Duardin models that I have.
Yeah.
So I guess the only Duardin I have yet to see that hopefully we'll see sometime are the Chaos type.
Yeah. There's even a reference in there in, again, White Bearded Ancestor. And I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to just paraphrase it. But I think Grungni is looking out on these berserkers, and by berserkers I don't mean the Fire Slayer kind, but like the corn kind. And he's like not holding it against him, because this is a thing where like it's Age of Chaos. They survived the Age of Chaos, and he's like a craftsman doesn't blame the metal he left out in the rain to rust, and doesn't or the wood that was left out in the rain to rot, or the metal that went into an Asgorite forge. It's like, ooh,
right,
okay,
right.
all right.
We've seen a couple references. There's another one in Robbie McNiven's Scourge of Fate.
Yep. Yeah, that was it. It was a long haul, guys, but we got there and faster than we could have with as many stories as there were to cover. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the listeners sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. It's we haven't done novels or I guess not. This wasn't a novel, but we haven't done like a non-battle tome or campaign book coverage in a while. And I think Paul and I both kind of had a hankering to do one. So I honestly am not sure when Aaron is going to slot this in, if this is extra or if it's going to fill in somewhere else. So we'll let him decide. But
right, if he releases it soon, then the people will understand all the references to the new Caradron battle tome.
Yeah,
he's just going to hold on to it for 18 months.
Why we're just jealous? But
wait until it comes around to the next one. So.
Exactly.
Right.
All right. Well, with that said, it is time for our reforging, but Sigmar willing, we'll be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord. Drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can do on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter. You can get the podcast at The Mortal Realms. Paul, where can they find you?
At PJ Shard.
Harry, can they find you anywhere?
Yep, I'm on Twitter at Toy Soldier Fun, and I'm on the Discord most days.
Perfect. I'm at red_Zeke, and if this sounds terribly edited, you can let at Dos Asos know on Twitter.
Exactly.
It's all his fault. You can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. That's Path to Story. That's Dogs of Warcry. That's What the Hex. That's this show. That's blog content, all kinds of stuff. And I'm sure this will not be out before Adepticon, so hopefully we saw you at Adepticon. Thanks for listening.
Yep.
All right, we're already recording. We've been recording for 14 minutes, so plenty of room, plenty of space for excerpts for Aaron. You're welcome. Let's start with you, Phil. Ha. Sorry, Phil's not here. You can tell I normally record What the Heck. Dun, 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 dun. That's how Aaron knows that it's actually at the end.
Oh, okay. Again, this is like a meeting your heroes type moment, because you know, Davy's just been a voice in my ears for years now.
Here I am in a dingy Wisconsin basement.
Exactly.
Aaron is very cool. I love Aaron.